Hey, welcome to Mad English TV. I have a very interesting question for you today. Who controls English? Who controls English? I made a video recently on words native English speakers don't use. Okay, words like vocabularies or touristic or whom. Okay, you can just check my channel. I made it a few days ago. Just watch that. But somebody posted a comment on that video saying this. I think you need to realize that you speak a variant of English that is not defining for the language. On top of that, one's social or cultural circle might influence one's view. If you are teaching, you should go by the book or by the numbers, rather than by personal impression. Touristy is not English, but Americanized English. Touristic has been and still is in wider use. And even in Americanized English, the prevalence of the words is about equal. As for who versus whom, the latter is not a dead word. It has been declining with about the same rate as who, but is still in common use. Okay, so I really appreciate all kinds of comments on my channel. I've never gotten a comment like this before, so I wanted to address it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each piece separately. Okay, first he says, I think you need to realize that you speak a variant of English that is not defining for the language. I completely agree. No one person speaks English that can define the whole language, right? How can one small piece of English represent the whole language? That's crazy. And I've said in the past, in my past lessons, that English is a wild animal. Okay, look at this wild bear. English is a wild animal. Nobody really knows what English is. Okay, linguists even discuss whether English is one language or many languages. What do you think? Is English one language or many languages? You might think, oh, English is one language. Okay, well, if English is one language, then why can't I understand some people from like Scotland or Ireland? They're native English speakers, and I'm a native English speaker, so why can't we understand each other? Well, English must be more than one language, right? Nobody knows. That's why this is discussed. Okay, then he says, on top of that, one's social or cultural circle might influence one's view. Well, that's obvious, right? If you grow up in one circle, you're going to think this is right. If you grow up in this circle, you're going to think this is right. For example, if you grow up in the UK, you're going to think this is called a bonnet. But if you grow up in Canada or the US, you're going to think this is called a hood, right? It's just different circles thinking different things. It's how we are raised. We're raised to use certain words, maybe to use certain phrases. And so it's a different way to say it, right? Then he says, if you are teaching, you should go by the book or by the numbers rather than by personal impression. Now, this is where I disagree, okay? My position would be, if you want to learn English by the book, then buy a book, okay? Just buy a book. Don't watch my YouTube videos if you want to learn by the book, okay? So, but he also says, or by the numbers. Okay, you should go by the numbers rather than personal impression. Now, what does he mean? Which numbers does he mean? Well, I said in my video that we don't use the word touristic. Okay, so he looked it up on a site. I'll post this site right down there. He posted it also in the comments, so you could go on that video and look at his post there. But I'll post this link also down here below this video. Okay, so this says that basically touristic is more used than touristy. Now, I want to explain to you why we can't go by the numbers, okay? There are about 4 non-native English speakers in the world for every 1 native English speaker. Okay, that's crazy. That means that non-native English speakers outnumber native English speakers 4-1. That's crazy because most other languages don't have that characteristic. Okay, like Hindi, for example. There's far more native Hindi speakers than non-native Hindi speakers. The same with Spanish, okay? So many native Spanish speakers. And there's a lot of people who are learning Spanish and who speak Spanish, but it's not this way. With English, we have non-native English speakers way up here and native English speakers way down here. So it's a very interesting position to be in. And that's why the title of this video is Who Controls English? So I'm a native English speaker. Do I control English, or do these people control English? Because they outnumber me. Look at this. In India, there are 125 million English speakers. In India. In Canada, there's only 28 million English speakers. Wow. So if India writes a grammar book and they say this is right, and Canada writes a grammar book and says, this is right, then who's right? Well, if we go by the numbers, then India would be right? But that's not how the world actually is. That's not reality. In reality, people would view Canada as having more authority over the English language than India. In India, they speak, a whole bunch of other languages like Hindi, Tamil, they speak a lot of languages in India. There's hundreds and hundreds of languages. In Canada, we speak English and French, okay? Most of the population is English, but there is also a large French-speaking population, okay? But when it comes to English, people look at me and they would say, oh yeah, he's an native English speaker. Whereas if they look at someone from India, they would probably think on first impression that English wasn't their mother tongue, even if maybe it was their mother tongue, okay? So in reality, I'm saying that this is why we can't go by the numbers. Now, he goes on to say, touristy is not English, but Americanized English. Okay, now this is interesting, because if we go by the numbers, then Americanized English is English. Look at these numbers. The USA has 234 million native English speakers. The UK has 54 million. Canada has 28 million. Australia has 15 million. Look, the US has far more than all these countries combined. And we could add New Zealand, Ireland, South Africa. Okay, the US would still be far larger than all the other languages, all the other countries' versions of English combined. Okay, so Americanized English is English if we go by the numbers. Okay, so then he says, touristic has been and still is in wider use, and even in Americanized English, the prevalence of the words is about equal. Okay, now I just disagree with this. Okay, the graph he gave is this, okay? Touristic, touristy, from the years 1800 to year 2000, British English, insert lots of books. Okay, so obviously in written English over the past 100 or 200 years, I mean, it's not really going to represent reality right now. So, I can tell you from my personal experience that I don't know any native English speakers who use the word touristic. We don't really use that adjective when we talk about stuff. Like, if I want to talk about a destination, I would just say, that's a great tourist destination. It wouldn't be a good touristic destination. Okay, which other context could I use the word touristic? We just don't use that word at all. If we want to talk about a place being very attractive to tourists, then we use the word touristy. So that place is really touristy. So he goes on to say, as for who versus whom, the latter is not a dead word it has been declining with about the same rate as who, but is still in common use. Okay, so in my video, I said that the word whom is dead, right? He's saying it's not dead. Well, let's think about it this way. Like, would you say cassette tapes are dead or not? Well, obviously not, because people still use these. I think my grandma still has a tape player, and a lot of people still use these. If you've got a portable tape player, it's called a Walkman. Okay, people still use a Walkman, and they listen to it and they go running with their Walkman with a cassette inside. People use them. So are they dead? Is it dead? Well, no, it's still around. But my case is that you can get by without using it. So if you can get by in life without ever using a tape or a cassette player, then is it dead? Well, I think so, sort of. So one of my teaching principles is don't burden English learners with things that native English speakers don't use. So, look, the word whom, we don't use it. I know a lot of native English speakers, we don't use it in our speech, for sure. Sometimes people use it in writing, but I would say 99% of native English speakers don't know how to use the word whom correctly. Okay? I edit masters' papers. I edit people's writing. And so I see a lot of writing. Nobody knows how to use the word whom. Okay? Maybe if you're an editor or a great writer and you use the word whom, well, then great. But normal people don't know how to use it. And this is the point. You could get a PhD from Harvard University without ever using the word whom. That's the truth. So I want to make it easy for you. I don't want to put a burden on you. If I can help take burdens off you, then great. Then I'm making it more simple for you. Now, I know you're not stupid, right? If you see the word whom, you're going to know what it means. Okay, whom means who. If you read it somewhere, you're going to understand it. Like, look at this. To whom are you going to give the gift? Okay, that's correct. You can't say to who are you going to give the gift. Okay, but the problem is that we don't use this construction. Normal English people don't use this construction. We would just say, who are you going to give the gift to? In both our written and oral English, we would say this. I don't know anybody who would use these. Now, these are in books. Like, a lot of books are old, right? You might have a book from 50 years ago or 100 years ago. And that's how people talk. That's how people used English. But the thing is, English evolves, it changes. So I'm telling you now that actually the word whom is dead. So that's just how it is. My opinion is based on my experience, not on books from the past 100 or 200 years. Okay, so look, he says, I think you need to realize that you speak a variant of English that is not defining for the language. Now, let's try to imagine if there was one person in the world who spoke international English, who would it be? Think about it right now. Who would speak the most international English? Would it be David Beckham? Well, no, David Beckham, well, he's, from Britain. He speaks has a British accent and uses, British vocabulary and things like that. Would it be, I don't know, Brad Pitt? Well, he's American, and he can do a good British accent. All these actors, they're really good with their accents, right? But who would it be? Who would be the number one person who speaks with an international accent? I think I would be very close to this point. I have a Canadian accent and I use, Canadian words, right? Because I'm Canadian. But actually my accent and my English is very international. Here's why. I grew up in Pakistan. I lived the first half of my life in Pakistan. And I've lived in China, Germany, the UK, and India. And I've flown around the world both ways. Okay, I've flown around the world this way, and I've been to dozens of countries. So I know the problems of the different varieties of English. I know all the different varieties of English. Okay, I've experienced them. I have a lot of friends from the UK, Australia, all these different places. So, when I'm teaching, obviously I'm a Canadian and I'm teaching you sort of North American English. If you really want to learn British English, there's a lot of good teachers on YouTube from the UK. It might be better to learn from them if you're going to move to the UK, right? But what I want to tell you is that when I make these lessons, they're based on this experience, okay? So I'm not just telling you what I think. I'm telling you years and years of experience, international experience, okay? So that's why you can trust my lessons, okay? I hope you trust my lessons, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if all my life experiences doesn't matter. So if you trust me or you don't trust me, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is, are my lessons helpful for you? If they're helpful for you, keep watching them. If they're not helpful for you, don't watch them. It's a really simple formula, okay? I hope my lessons are helpful. If I can help you learn anything or you want me to make a lesson on anything, just let me know in the comments right down there. But let's do some homework. I want to know, what does the term native English speaker mean to you? Think about it. What is a native English speaker? Let me know in the comments right down there, and I'll see you over in the next episode of Mad English TV. Take care.